Everyone has a story to tell. Welcome to DingoTalk, where we explore the experiences that make us who we are. Here's your host, Carlo Guadagnino.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is DingoTalk. My guest this week is the head football coach at Lyon College, Coach Chris Douglas. Before we get into Coach Douglas's story, let me tell you a little bit about Lyon College. It's located in Batesville, Arkansas. It's got 666 students. It's $45,750 before aid. It's $20,150 after aid. They have a 60% acceptance rate and a 37% graduation rate. And their top three majors are business admin and management, exercise science and kinesiology, and general psychology. Coach Douglas has a it's a similar path to a lot of coaches that we've talked to in the past, but it's also his own path. And it's interesting to see from his time at MacMurray to what's going on at Lyon now. But it's not my job to tell you that. It's Coach Douglas's job. So without further ado, this is Coach Douglas. What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week is the head football coach at Lyon College, Coach Chris Douglas. Coach, thank you for joining us.
Carlo, great to meet you, to visit with you. We've been back and forth by email, but it's good to be able to do this face-to-face. So I appreciate you having me on and looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn a lot about Arkansas football, high school football, and then into the college ranks. So before we do that, got to do it like we do every week. I got to throw you in the time machine. So how did you find yourself at Southwestern College the first time?
Yeah. So I grew up in eastern Oklahoma. I'm actually Batesville, where we're located here in north central, northeast Arkansas. It's actually not very far from where I was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi, but moved to Oklahoma when I was a kid, played all the sports, football, basketball, baseball, track, but football is my passion. Football has always been the sport I was really best at. And I actually went to a junior college first. I went to Northeastern Oklahoma A&M in Miami, Oklahoma. Back then, they were a perennial national champion or runner-up. They won a national championship the year before I got there and one after I left. So kind of missed out on the good times there. But ended up at Southwestern, Winfield, Kansas, a small school very similar to Lyon, actually. United Methodist School, 600, 700 students. It's called Southwestern, but it's really in South Central Kansas. But was there as a player, had a pretty good career, particularly going in my senior year. Had some fun with it. Didn't get enough. Stuck around for a fifth year to just be a student assistant. Took a few more classes. 1 year turned into two turned into five, and I figured out I wanted to do this as a career. And so 5 years there as a student assistant, and kind of graduated up to full time, but very little pay back in the 90s, mid 90s. NAI schools were not paying a whole lot other than maybe the head coach and maybe one full-time assistant, but we were doing a lot by adjunct or part-time. We call them 3 o'clock coaches sometimes. But deciding that I knew I wanted to get into coaching as a career, so I knew I needed to go somewhere else. So I ended up going to Abilene Christian University for just one season. I wasn't even really there a full year, but they had a GA spot for running back position. My wife, Michelle, and I had gotten married, though, before that. So being that GA and being married can be a little tricky, particularly if your wife gets pregnant.
Right.
And making $500 a month and getting kind of some reduction on a rental isn't going to cut it when your wife's the breadwinner. So we ended up taking the defensive coordinator position at Jamestown College up in North Dakota. Was there for about a year and a half with Nick Skotnicki as the head coach. And wow, what a transition. 24 hours going from Abilene, Texas to Jamestown, North Dakota. Literally left on December 31st. It's 2 days of driving. Every mile I took, I think the snow got deeper. And by the time I got there, we left Abilene, it was 50, 55 degrees. It was 15 degrees and 27 inches of snow, and I didn't see the ground until May. So definitely an adventure. Wife wasn't super fired up being 19 hours away from her family, but and we had our first child up there. But it was an adventure. I loved it. we were playing ball. I mean, so that was the fun part of it. Was a defense coordinator there for a year and a half, and I'm literally sitting behind the computer, kind of like I am now. I was working on some defensive playbook stuff. I was on the defensive side then, and the athletic director, Coach Stevens, who was the athletic director when I was there previously, called me and said, "Are you interested in coming back?" They had a really late change in the head coaching position. And of course, when your alma mater says, "Come on back," you don't say no.
Right.
So I'm like third youngest head coach in the nation at the time. I'm 31 and a half, basically. The second youngest, or maybe the very youngest, was another coach in our conference who I actually talked to on the phone today, surprisingly. But yeah, it was definitely a venture. You know, you're a young coach and you think, man, I got my manual, I got this plan, How am I going to handle this situation? But when you've really never done it from the head coach's chair, completely different. I wasn't ready. You know, basically 8 years of coaching. I was way too young, hadn't had enough pelts, hadn't enough experience, hadn't gone through some of the trials and making hard decisions. And it was tough. And 5 years we went, you know, just kind of slowly declined to the point where they said, "Hey, you know, we'd like to move on and go another direction." Very kindly said, "Hey, you're one of those coaches that are either have been fired or going to be fired." And so I got the other end of it. But so that stinks. You know, at your alma mater and you really can't go back. But, you know, we loved Winfield, started to raise our first child there, had another one born there. So, you know, we're developing our family. Wound up going to high school for a couple of years as a head coach at a small high school called Stigler, Oklahoma. Only about 35 minutes from where I grew up. But really my heart's in college. And so I ended up taking a big pay cut and going to Northeast Kansas to one of the worst junior college programs at the time in Highland Community College. Kind of rough, you know, the Jayhawk, if no one's familiar, the Jayhawk Conference in junior college football is really, really stout, really, really tough. You got Butler Community College. At that time, they were kind of ruling the nation as far as NJCAA, you know, in and out of national championships. Now it's Hutchinson, which is in the same conference. Garden City used to always be very, very good. So we're playing some really good teams. And was there 2 years as the offensive coordinator. Coach Mike Beagle gave me an opportunity to get back into it, and definitely appreciate him for that. But I knew if I didn't get out, I was going to get let go with everybody else. And so I took the early shoot, and we took the worst Division III college in the nation, probably. It was probably the worst football program in the nation at the 4-year level at MacMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois. And made the 6-hour move from Highland to Jacksonville, team that for 4 years straight had only won one game. They were 1-39. And I kid you not, I tell this story all the time, and I think people think I'm kidding, but the average GPA for the team that fall after I first got there was 2.19. We were barely eligible as a team.
Yeah.
We had 5 guys that had earned just over a 3.0. We only had 27 guys coming back from an 0-10 team. And I took the job really late. Like my first day on campus was June 1. And the previous staff had only signed 17. So we did some crash course recruiting.
Not where you want to be. Not where you want to be when June 1.
Kind of behind the 8 ball. I mean, we literally went in the season with 5 offensive linemen. God made football. I mean, you can play, you know, 12, 22 personnel. You can play 0-05 personnel. You know, you can move the skill guys around. God made football. You got to have 5 offensive linemen now.
You got to have 5 big boys.
I always used to joke we'd go to practice, and where the guys practice was right next to one of the academic buildings. And I'd always joke, "Hey, it's study time for the guys." I mean, because we couldn't have the offensive line banging too much just for fear of getting hurt in practice, and then we wouldn't have them available for games. But you know, we won 2 games. We were only 2-8 that first season, but it was success because you know it was twice as many wins as they had in the previous 4 years.
Right.
So it was a slow, steady turnaround, but we got the thing turned around about after 5 years. We went 6-5, and then you know proceeded to finish second in our conference 3 years in a row, and really got the thing turned around. And you know we stuck around for 9 years, and kind of MacMurray, what definitely wasn't the first, but We were kind of the canary in the coal mine with the stress that higher ed is under right now. And now we're hitting this enrollment cliff where all these 18-year-olds are disappearing. MacMurray closed. I was one of the last to hold keys as a head coach and interim athletic director at the time. And so when COVID hit, and we maybe had an opportunity to get some funding, to get maybe a loan from a bank to try to stay open a little longer. All the banks, they all just panicked, and all that financing disappeared.
Right.
And so the school closed in at the end of the spring semester in 20, and that's how I wound up here. Lyon was the only job open in the nation at any level. As far as a head coaching job, and all the
Right.
assistant jobs were all being frozen because no one knew in March, April, May that if we were going to have football, and if we did, what it would look like.
Right.
And so, I mean, I was just extraordinarily blessed to be able to, one, stay in head coaching and just get a job, period, in that time frame. And then we were also able to bring over two of our coaches, and then actually one of our players that wanted to get into coaching. And so we were able to actually bring some guys on, and then we had to fight to keep them paid because, we're in the middle of COVID and people were getting furloughed and people were getting reassigned. And so, we really had some trials and trying to get things going even here was pretty problematic, as everybody can remember, 5 years ago now, having to deal with COVID and everything. So that's kind of what's got me here to Lyon. And, we've enjoyed our going on 5 years now, and, our kids have gotten bigger and going on to college and and getting married and all sorts of stuff like that. So, that's where we're at now. That's how we've gotten at least to this point.
So over that's a 28-year coaching career. For those of you
actually going into 32 total and 22 as a head coach.
22 is, so I see I messed my numbers up. That's
okay.
My math
it's a lot
skills.
of years, so it's understandable.
So I have a couple questions. One, going through, especially, given the climate, there are a lot of schools that are at that cliff or have already kind of made the jump. What is the conversation like to your athletes first? What does that conversation consist of, and how did they react?
Just like on the closure at Mac, or just like currently here?
Just the closure at Mac.
Well, here's the crazy thing about it. We go into Christmas break, right before Christmas break, in the administration, and so much credit to our president and our administration at MacMurray back then, to really be transparent about this, because I've heard war stories of other schools closing since then that they had no idea until the last week or two before they announced closure. We at least knew going in, hey, we've got to raise this money, we've got to partner with another school, or we're going to close.
Okay.
And so there's a big fundraising effort. And so our students knew this going in. It started to leak out, and then there was a press release. And so we were constantly trying to reinforce and give them sometimes weekly or twice a week updates on our progress. I remember we would meet weekly with our team during the off season, and our first order of business was, here's where we're at as far as our fundraising dollars. Here's what the administration's saying. And really, our guys stayed super positive about it. I think all of our guys were very adamant about staying. And you always have a few guys that you're going to lose, whether things are good or bad. That doesn't matter. But we didn't have like a mass departure. Hey, I'm going to do this. I got to go here, whatever. But then COVID hit right at spring break. We never saw those guys again. Never. Right. And so it was really hard in that aspect, because we couldn't just grieve together. When the announcement happened on March 24th, I think it was, or March 25th, something like that, everybody had been gone for almost 3 weeks, because gone for spring break. We don't let them come back because of COVID. We thought we were going to come back a week later. Of course, that didn't happen. Right. So no one was back. We all went remote. No one came back in the spring except to piece by piece, person by person, come and empty their rooms out. And so we never really had that, kind of like seeing the body in the, or seeing the casket in the grave. You don't have that moment of closure.
Right.
And so, a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages. I prepared a video release because I knew ahead of time a little bit that this was going to be announced on this day. We had to keep it under wraps and everything, of course. But, I prepared a thing and sent out a video to all of our players. And, we had a lot of phone conversations with coaches that were hunting more players, or they wanted our helmets, and players, hey, what do you think about this school? And hey, I know this coach. I think you would really fit with him. So there was tons of those conversations going on, but we never had that opportunity as a group. And that really stunk.
Right. Now, along with that, so you go through the transition now to Lyon. I've asked a lot of coaches this question, and I'm interested how this conversation went, especially given that COVID was really in the middle of it. What is that interview like? Are we, obviously, I don't think we're talking X's and O's, right? I mean, at that point, X's and O's are you're interviewing for a head coaching job. They assume you know that. Are we looking at fundraising and, recruiting, community involvement? How does that conversation, and what are the components of that conversation with being not able to talk to somebody in person?
That was the whole thing. It was all virtual. It was actually kind of funny. We kind of did it piecemeal, where I would have, some time with a committee, and then I had some time with the president and time with the provost and so on. And so it was kind of piecemealed, and they would have specific questions for their area. When I'm meeting with the provost, a lot of academic questions. Meeting with the committee, it was a lot of questions really just on personality and coaching style and how you organize a staff. It was the shortest interview I've ever been a part of, that's for sure. It was, as you said, it was all virtual. We weren't allowed to come on campus. Campus was closed at that time. So it went, and never really taken a job sight unseen either. You want to go to the town, you want to see the campus, you want to get a feel face to face if it's a good fit. But it was kind of one of those deals where you knew this was a different deal, and so you kind of had to take a leap of faith. Right. And that's really what it came down to was, you either panic and take a job because a job's available, or you take a leap of faith. And I chose the faith part of it. And it's been hard. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's been hard here for 4 years. I mean, I really feel like we're getting traction as we go. But it definitely was a leap of faith. And I chose the, I guess, the glass half full instead of empty.
Now, talk to us about Batesville. What is Batesville, Arkansas like?
It's a beautiful town. We're right on the edge of the Ozarks. So I'm looking east through my wall here. Literally, you go east of here, it's Mississippi River Delta, and it's soybean or it's rice, maybe a little bit of corn, but it's all very agricultural. So no density of population until you get to Jonesboro, and that's where Arkansas State is. It's about 60,000 people. Surrounding community probably makes it around 80. And of course, the college brings a lot to that town, but everything else is very small, very rural. Well, you go a little north and all of west here, and you're literally in the Ozark Mountains.
Okay.
So again, not a lot of population because you're in the Ozarks. Right. It's not the Rockies. It's not even really the Appalachians as far as like altitude, but it's a beautiful area, whether it's river kayaking or waterfalls or caving. I mean, it's just a beautiful location. People are great here. It's a really nice sized town, about 12,000 in population, but it is really the cultural and the economic hub of this area. We'll have 70,000 people come into town, whether they're coming in from outside of town or even outside the county to come into work, because we have quite a bit of economy and quite a bit of industry here in town. But we also have the biggest hospital in this area. So we service like 7 or 8 counties for medical services. So we have a ton of people that come into town. So there's times, particularly when school's in and people are trying to drop their kids, or it's rush hour around 5 o'clock, like the highway's packed. It's a little tough to get. You can literally take 15 to 20 minutes just to get across town because of some of the traffic. But it really is a neat town. A lot of little quaint little activities and fun stuff to do. We've definitely enjoyed our time here for sure.
Now, let's talk about the program a little bit. Let's put me in the room. You're talking to a recruit and their parents. What are we looking for? Minus the fact that like we said, got to be able to play ball because you wouldn't be in your
Sure.
office. But what are we looking for in a Lion guy?
Yeah. I mean, number one thing is they've got to have academic seriousness. Sometimes you're going to take chances on guys that maybe struggled as a freshman and started to figure out a little bit as a sophomore and then really kind of started to roll as a junior and a senior. And they took it seriously in the second half of their academic career in high school. But, most of our guys, this is a pretty rigorous academic institution. It's one of the top in this region, probably the most rigorous academic institution in Arkansas. We've got Rhodes College right next door in Memphis, about 2 hours away. That's a pretty prestigious academic school. It's a little bit more regionally known. Has a little bit more historical cachet, I guess, academically. You've got Wash U. I don't think there's a lot of schools. Washington University up in St. Louis, about 6 hours away. We're probably no one's really comparing to that until you get to the Grinnells and
Right.
Drakes and things like that in this area. But really, really strong academic institution here. But it's very small. And so we're looking for guys that have that intimate environment where you're going to have a 12-to-1 student to teacher ratio. You're going to have a lot of small classes. And as I like to tell parents, your son cannot fall through the cracks here at Lyon. Your son may crawl through the cracks. He may squeeze through the cracks. He's going to refuse to go to class or he's going to refuse to study, but we're all going to know it, and eventually you'll know it, whether I'm giving you a phone call or your son's giving you a phone call because you're flunking 3 classes. But we're definitely looking for a guy, number one, academically serious. As I tell our recruits, you have to be a different breed to play Division III football, particularly in this day and age where there's an NIL rev share mentality that now I'm going to profit because I'm pretty good at football.
Right.
Like our guys at Division III you're still not playing at that upper level because you're 2 inches too short or you're 20 pounds too light or you're 2/10 too slow, but you're still a really good ball player and you're passionate about it. And that's the key. I'm not playing because of the crowd. I'm not playing because of the cheerleaders. I'm not playing because of the name on the back of the jersey. I'm playing because I have a passion for the sport. And I don't know that I can really live without it for the next 4 years. And really, honestly, I tell guys all the time, like, your 4 years are up, get the most out of it, but it's probably over for you after that. There's not a lot of noon football going on, at some business, some job site. It's not like basketball. It's not like tennis, even, beer league softball. Like that doesn't exist for football. So you better get the most out of it. And so you got to have passionate guys that really love football.
Now, along with the academic side of things, I want to talk a little bit more about the recruitment side. Now, there's 2 Division III schools in Arkansas, right? You and Hendricks.
Hendricks, correct.
And then there's a handful of Division II schools.
Yep.
What is the recruiting like? I mean, like you said, there's a large kind of circle there for you, but you're also competing with Rhodes right here, Hendricks over here. What is the recruitment outlook for you guys?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It reminds me a lot of Kansas. You've got 2 states that half of the state is very thin on population. Mm-hmm. In Kansas, you get past Wichita, Hutchinson, Salina. In western Kansas, it's all wheat and it's very rural and not a lot of population. You go east, the population thickens up. Mm-hmm. But you've got 8 junior colleges. You have 4 Division IIs, I think. You have 2 Division Is in Kansas.
Right.
Like, that's a lot of competition for a small population base. It's not very dissimilar than Arkansas. Eastern Arkansas, along the Mississippi River, kind of running diagonally through the state, is all very agricultural. It's very rural. And then you have the Ozarks on top of that thins out the population. So you've got population bases like Jonesboro, like Little Rock, Hot Springs, Pine Bluff. You've got Northwest Arkansas. You've got Fort Smith along the river. But the population is not dense.
Right.
You still have 5, 6 Division IIs. You have that Great American Conference. It's half Arkansas, half Oklahoma. And the stronger of the league is in Arkansas. You've got an NAI in Arkansas Baptist, and you got Hendricks and us. That's a lot of competition for a really small population base. So it is a slugfest for sure. We probably compete with or try to compete with the Division II schools as much as anything because they're needing to fill roster spots, and sometimes they'll find difference makers, but sometimes they're also trying to find guys that are developmental guys that
Right.
might be difference makers for us. And that's the aggravation sometimes on our end of things is, a Division II school that's going to take a chance on a developmental guy that might be that 2 inches too short, but they're trying to fill a roster. Shoot, we're trying to make a difference and trying to find a guy that we think can play pretty soon for us. So we have to go out of state. We will normally sign about 40 to 45, maybe 48% of our class from Arkansas, but we have to go to really Alabama and Texas,
Okay.
Eastern Texas, Dallas, DFW area, and Houston quite a bit. But we're still going to sign some guys out of Louisiana, Mississippi, a little bit out of Oklahoma, maybe Missouri. Tennessee, you would think would be good, but there's some financial state aid issues that make it kind of prohibitive
Right.
for us to be able to get guys out of Tennessee. But we'll always get a few guys in each of those neighboring states, but really outside of our state, it's going to be Eastern Texas and Western Alabama.
Now, Coach, before we get any further into talking about recapping the 2024 season, previewing 2025, I want to ask, as I was reading your bio, education seems to be very important to you. You brought up Wichita, Kansas. It's interesting because that is where you got your master's in sports admin at Wichita State. Why go for the master's? What was the driving force behind that?
Yeah, I knew pretty early getting into coaching that I wanted to be a head coach. I wanted to put my stamp on a program. I just wanted to have that ability to really direct and steer the ship. And you really in higher ed, you need that piece of paper to say that I've taken my degree, not to obviously to a terminal level, to a PhD or something like that, but to take that next step to show that even though you're in athletics and you're part of staff, not really a faculty, to show that academics are important to you. It kind of felt natural to me to take what I had done as an undergrad and kind of shaped my own phys ed, biology, even a little bit of business and psychology classes to take it into that sports administration role, that early on sports management before it became sports management type of degree, to give me that ability to be able to throw that out there in a resume, in a job interview. But also, I really enjoyed some of the classes that we took. It was again, I was more on the life science side of things in my undergrad. And then I got more into the administrative and the business side of it. So it was a nice little combination. And it's really kind of turned out because of different jobs I've had to teach, whether it was Jamestown and I'm teaching sports psychology and exercise physiology and kinesiology, or going back to or going to MacMurray and teaching sociology of sport and legal issues in sport and introduction to sports management, had that opportunity to do that. So it's really kind of paid off for me in those aspects. But, really for me, I don't know that I really went into this thing in college thinking I was going to be a teacher. It was not my desire to be in the classroom teaching necessarily, but I had a tremendous role model.
Right.
I knew going into college, I was not skipping class. I was not flunking classes. I was not going to blow off exams. Now, I did plenty of late cram studying. Procrastination, struck me a few times. But watching my mother go back to college, in her 40s and drive sometimes 2 to 3 nights a week, an hour and 15 minutes to go get her teaching certificate for almost 2 years, working full time as a teacher's aide in the same school that I'm at, by the way, which was always a little problematic as a 6th grader, knowing that she was in the building. But then getting in the car after a full day of work, driving an hour, sit in a classroom for 3 hours and turn around and not get back till 11:30 at night, and then get up and go do it again the next day. Like that told me right there, if I'm going to do this college thing, I'm not screwing around with it.
And then what advice do you have for somebody similar to your situation after your 4 years of playing was done? And we talked a little bit, most of us 4 years, If you're lucky, you get 4 years. You get 40 games.
That's right.
What advice do you have for those guys maybe that are graduating in May or that are realizing or maybe haven't realized yet that this is the last summer that they're going to go through summer workouts and camp and then you're 10 guaranteed and hopefully more. What's the advice for those guys who want to get into coaching, be it at their alma mater? You know, you were an assistant and then got the opportunity to come back. I'm sure you've had guys that are at Lyon that have stayed on to be a student assistant. What is the advice for them, and how do they make that transition from player to coach?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you bring that up. So Saturday last weekend, obviously Easter weekend, we drove up to Illinois. My daughter still lives not in Jacksonville, but in Springfield, just over the way, about 30 minutes. And then we were really up there for a wedding for one of our former players at MacMurray, was that one player I mentioned that came with us to start his coaching career. And then so I had a chance to visit with him. He's at Greenville University now. Ian Lieb got married. So, got to spend some time with him and reminisce a little bit, but, played for me for 4 years, was a great player, great athlete. Didn't even know it really until spring of his senior year. He wanted to or late fall of his senior year, wanted to get into coaching. And so I just said, hey, let's go. You really wanting to get into this? Go to AFCA with us. Go to the American Football Coaches Association convention. And he did. I don't know at 18, or no, I'm sorry, 18, at 22, getting ready to graduate college. One, I didn't really know if I wanted to coach. But if I'd have gone to Coach Monty Lewis, my coach at that point, and he'd have said, well, hey, go with me to AFCA, I don't know that I'd have pulled the trigger. I don't know that I would have said, oh, wow, I got to step out and do this. And to Ian's credit, he did. He was all in. He had the suit, and he's got his business cards. I'm trying to prep him as much as I can, and then turn around. And on Monday, I've got a meeting with one of our former players who saved our bacon this spring because we lost a wide receiver coach about a month ago, right before we're starting spring ball. One of our former players, guess what, wants to get into coaching.
Right.
And so he coaches the wide receivers all spring. And so as I told Xavier, who's his name, it's just like with Ian, make sure, first of all, wherever you go where a head coach is going to mentor you. Mm-hmm. A head coach is going to have a developmental plan for you. And I even told Xavier, I've got to do a better job of quarterly, every 3 months, maybe once a month, whatever it is. I've got to do a better job of meeting with each of our assistant coaches and following up on that. Right. Because that's one thing that I've taken a lot of pride in over the years, is particularly at MacMurray, where it was just me, our defense coordinator, and a bunch of young guys that were first, second, third year in coaching that were getting paid very little, getting meals and getting housing on campus with all the other students in the dorm. And to see those guys go out and get other jobs and advance, and some of those guys, are working in operations at Division I, and some of those guys went on to full-time coordinator roles, and some have even worked into, even being a head coach. To see that really gives me really a lot of pride that I never really thought of when I first got that head coaching job at Southwestern, to think, hey, I've got guys that are now growing out and doing great things because of the time that I was able to share. And I was able just to pour a little bit into them while we could. So I really try to be very intentional about that. And so I tell young coaches, one, find a coach who is going to be intentional about developing you. Right. And also not be that guy that's going to be mad, upset, possessive when they get a young coach, and understand that it is developing them and giving them other opportunities. Because one mistake I made, and this is no reflection on Coach Monty Lewis, I stayed on my own volition for 5 years, but I really should have only been there a year or two and moved on to a GA position somewhere and get to know more people and get different experiences with a different staff. And I just didn't do that. I loved Southwestern so much. I loved Coach Lewis so much. I loved Winfield so much. And then I met Michelle. And so there was another reason to not leave, because she's an undergrad still at that point. So I would tell young guys, yeah, come to Lyon, come for a year or two, get developed, but then find a advancement. As I tell all of our staff, if you move laterally and it's not for even like a different role or different opportunity that's going to grow you, then what are we doing here? Maybe if you
Right.
don't like me, that's fine. I mean, I just, just tell me you don't like how this is going. But if you're moving just for a lateral position, like, why are we doing that? Just
Mhm.
continue to build what we've got here. But if you're going because it's going to give you an opportunity to develop a new skill set, to teach another, coach another position, to learn something new, to develop a network, maybe it's a change in level, going from D3 to D2 or something like that. Man, I'm going to be the first one to pat you on the butt and say, man, good luck. And
Right.
sucks for me because I become an HR guy instead of a coach now. But I mean, that's part of it. We're trying to develop players. We're also trying to develop coaches as well.
Now, Coach, let's talk about 2024 really quick, and then we'll move into 2025. 1-9 overall, 0-8 in the conference. The win came very early, 48-28 over Grinnell at Grinnell.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
What happened last year? What was your takeaway? What were as the season, now that we're far enough away from it, what was the what was the takeaway?
We're plenty far away. We've done plenty of analysis on an ugly year. It was one of the stranger years that I've ever been a part of. We had our biggest senior group maybe ever, definitely in my time here. It was our first recruiting class. We felt really good about that group. I felt like there were some shortcomings that ended up exposing themselves in leadership, and that's at the end of the day, that's my fault for not developing that and not being maybe more proactive. But it really comes down to when you just look at it very analytically, we did some really nice things at a lot of times offensively and defensively. But it's hard when you got to play five quarterbacks due to injuries.
Right.
We had guys go down, one for about a month in a game in game two, and 8 plays later, his backup, who's pretty good himself, breaks his ankle and he's out for the season. Then his backup comes in and he goes down 4 games later with an ACL. So it was just a
Right.
rash of that, and already pretty young at quarterback, and then having to play 4 and 5 quarterbacks. But you just can't turn the ball over 26 times and only take it away 6 and expect to have any type of success.
Right.
The funny thing about that, you would think, oh gosh, 26 turnovers, like, running backs must have been fumbling it and receivers must have been putting it on the ground. And our running backs turned it over one time. Our receivers turned it over one time. 24 of them were from the quarterback position. And then not all interceptions, but
Right.
several of them were just fumbles. I mean, I've never seen it where we have a little bit of a bad snap, or maybe not even a really bad snap. It's just quite a little bit off, and we literally dribble the ball down our leg. And you've watched the movies with Charlie Chaplin, and he kicks his bowler hat, and kind of literally look like that several times, and they just all happen to be in the red zone, by the way. So very, very unique year. Definitely hope it won't be a repeat of any sort, but it still shows that we still have a lot of room to grow.
Mm-hmm.
We've always got a few difference makers here and there, but we've also got to find more of those, and also just more quality depth that we've got to recruit and develop. So it was definitely one of the stranger years that I've gone through as far as just the play, the ball bouncing. Literally we'd be on our sideline and the opponent would fumble. And if the ball had bounced right, we'd have had we'd had a takeaway. We'd maybe have scooped it and got some yardage, but it bounced left.
Right.
And that just seemed to happen a lot more often, where it bounced left instead of right.
Now, 2025. Now we get rid of 2024. It's in the rear view. Spring ball is done. I was looking at the schedule. You guys open up with ETBU, then you have a date with that Arkansas Baptist who you talked to us about, NAIA, right. And then Greenville U and Westminster in Missouri, not in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
So my question is, and this is really about the scheduling side, and I think having the NAIA guy in there really leans to this. How difficult is it for, especially at the Division III level, when it comes to scheduling? Especially you got to schedule. You got four games and then a bye week, and then you open up into the conference. So
Yeah.
what is that like? And does the NAIA Arkansas Baptist, is that because of they had an opening, you guys had an opening, let's get it done?
Pretty much. Things just didn't line up for us to have a home game. It kind of gets a little bit not convoluted, but I have to kind of explain it a little bit. In our conference this year, we'll have 6 total teams, 5 conference opponents. It's really hard to find 5 non-conference opponents. So what we're doing is on week 11 at the end of the season, we will play a championship weekend where our number 1 will play our number 2 at the end of the year. Our number 3 will play our number 4. Our number 5 will play our number 6. So we'll play somebody twice. So that gives us an extra game in conference. So finding those 4 games is already tough enough. It just so lined up that we were able to get week 5 to be a bye week, to play our non-cons and then have a break and then jump into conference.
Okay.
Where it became problematic was because of the imbalance and only having 5 conference games, we had 3 away and 2 at home.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started lining up non-conference games, ETBU needed to be at home and Greenville needed to be at home. So by the time we got to, getting some of these last games, I really had to fight to try to get schools on our campus because, and you probably don't know this because, depends on how much, maybe you're going to bring this up here in a little bit, but we're building a stadium on campus finally after 10 years of football. But we don't want to roll in when only have 3 or even 2 home games like that.
Right.
That would be insane. So we really had to do a lot of conversation and searching for the right school that was okay with being on the road, and so, a little bit of negotiation here and there too. So that's why it wound up Arkansas Baptist was the best fit, because they needed a game and they were okay with playing it here. So so that was a blessing. And for them, it's easy. They can do a one day. It's 90 minutes from Little Rock, so it's a one-day travel. It's super simple. So it's been able to work out. It's not going to be perfect because we'll be 4 at home, 5 on the road, and then 1 neutral site game. But at least we got 4. And we've got an opportunity to kind of space those out as well. So we've got a nice little spread on our schedule too. So I'm really pleased with how the non-conference schedule has kind of lined itself up. It'll definitely be a challenge going against East Texas Baptist week 1 at their place. But when you're down in this area, there's some really good schools in the American Southwest and our conference as well in the SCAC. But it is really a challenge to find other schools, because if you're in the Northeast, or even if you're in Illinois or Indiana, there's a lot of Division III schools.
Yeah.
But you get them this far south, there's a lot more D2 and NAI schools and not as many D3 schools. And so it is a challenge to be able to line up a non-conference schedule sometime. And, back in 2023, when we made this decision at the end of 22, early 23, that we were going to go to the Division III level and move out of the NAI, I was pretty adamant that if we're going to do this, like football wise, let's just make the move. And instead of continuing to play as a non-affiliated member in the NAI, but still playing that conference schedule, like that made no sense to travel to Phoenix and go Panhandle State and Nelson in Dallas and all those NAI teams that we were playing. Didn't make sense to keep living in that world. So I bit the bullet, and we worked for about 18 months to put together a 100% independent and mostly Division III schedule. And it forced us to travel to New York twice. We went up to Iowa late in the year. Thank goodness it was second weekend in November. Usually that's a brutal weekend in Iowa.
Right.
We had beautiful weather. I literally had to strip clothes off at halftime because I was sweating so much. But we were able to pull it off. And then now finally last year to be in a conference, even though we really aren't fully members of the D3 club until July. July 1, we should be, as long as everything goes through with the competition committee, not the competition committee, the association committee, or whatever it's called. They'll approve it, sign off on it, And, we've been living that D3 life for a good while already. So it should be a rubber stamp, but we'll be officially D1 or D3 members once we get to that July 1 date.
And then, so there's a couple things to unpack there. One, you stole my thunder on your stadium. I wanted to show you that I did some dang research over here. But so talk to us about that. What was the fundraising process like? And why now? Why now is it time to build the stadium?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, Lyon had football way back in the early 1900s. I think started up in the maybe late teens, early 20s, carried it through 1952, and then dropped football and go another 60 years without it. We bring football back in 2015. And finally get to 10 years, and we even in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s when they played, didn't even play on campus then. Played at a site that now the Kroger grocery store is at, and the high school played on our field. But then now forward 60 years later, we're playing at Batesville High School, and it's nice to have your own home. Right. It really stinks on an operational setup when I've got to go get a 1-ton truck from plant operations every Friday, and our staff's got to load it up, and they got to drive over early and go set the field, and it's just a big hassle. Right. And it's not yours. They're orange and black. We're crimson and navy and white, and it was home, but it wasn't home. And we're so appreciative of Batesville High School over the years to do a solid for us, really. But it's also really, really nice to have your own. And so to get on campus, to really bring that atmosphere of football on the campus and really see our students come out for it, that's going to be huge. And it's really given us a kick in the tail to really spur some energy even into our band. When they first started football, they also brought on band, and they had 60, 75, 80 people in the band. The time I've been here, it's been in the teens and the 20s. And so that's even dropped off. So now being on campus has really brought a lot of energy to that as well. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that's really hard when you're a young football program, you don't have a lot of alumni that have that, I don't want to say disposable income, but they're in their retirement years. They're looking to give back to things that help make them who they are.
Right.
Well, when you've only had football for 10 years, all of your alumni are trying to find their second job after their first job of flipping burgers or selling shoes or whatever. And they probably got 2 kids. And so They have no disposable income. They have no giving ability for the most part. And so we really had to do this all corporately. And again, that's where the strength of Batesville really comes into play, whether it's 3 or so of our banks in town, like First Community and Farmers and Planners and Citizens Bank that have Centennial Bank that have given to this project, whether it's Atlas Asphalt and Bad Boy Mowers, who we're now naming the stadium after because of the huge donation that Bad Boy has given us, and Atlas Asphalt has given us, naming the field for. We've been able to put together about $2 million now. Wow. The bad thing is we still probably need another 1.5. It'll be a phased project, but it's enough to get us on campus, scoreboard, press box, all that stuff that we need just to be able to play. And then we add on concession stand later. We add on a visitor's locker room. We add on an entry plaza where people can gather and kind of tailgate a little bit. And it's going to be it's already going to be a really nice setup. The dirt's already been laid out. It's been leveled out. We've got a foundation for the press box. They say press box materials will probably arrive in the next 10 to 12 days. That'll go up pretty quick. And then they're saying June 1 for about 8 or 10 days, all that material for the bleachers stadium is going to show up. And 10 to 12 days, they'll be done. And we'll be ready to start grooming it and getting it ready.
And then July 1, you guys become official D3 and the stadium's ready to roll.
Absolutely. It all kind of hit at once.
Now, Coach, walk us through that a little bit. What was the transition like? I mean, obviously you had already kind of bit the bullet and did it, but what is the transition like when you're talking about going from being an NAIA school, or I guess similar to Schreiner? I had Coach Allen on They're in the process of now adding football, and he's going to take a year. So what is that process like when you're changing from NAIA to Division III?
Yeah, it really wasn't more than anything was educating our staff on some of the differences in recruitment, in just operational compliance and policies that sometimes you don't have. The eligibility piece is easier at Division III, really, because it all is it's very locally controlled.
Right.
It's institutional control, and NAI it is still kind of institutional control, but there's some hard and fast rules as far as hours completed and GPA and semesters attempted and things like that. But on more of the recruitment slash compliance as far as social media and interaction with players is definitely different. And so there's really an educational component. And that's really, if anything, that's what the NCAA really wants to emphasize, that there's continual education on what are the standards and the policies, the expectations that we have at this Division III level, and continual education of your staff so that we're not constantly in violation and then having to correct and then repeat the same violation. They expect some violations.
Right.
I mean, I've been told that if you don't have a few minor secondary violations, that may be a problem because that
they may
means
be looking at you a
you're
little,
not reporting it.
Yeah, they might be looking at you then. Like, oh, you guys haven't had any issues in X amount of years. Okay.
Yeah, and we've had a few minor secondary violations. That's part of it, and that's okay, as long as we're continuing to educate and correct. And so that's really been the crux of it. As I mentioned earlier, we really, even as an NAI, we'd really been kind of living in the financial aid world. We'd really already been living that Division III life already. Right. And so that's why I think it was being a high academic, being a small school, being very academically driven and holistically driven as an institution toward the development of our students. I felt like it was, once I got here and really absorbed it, I felt like the D3 move was a no-brainer and was 100% on board with it. I can't say that for all of our coaches because they were hired and they'd been living that NAI life. And it is hard. I mean, granted, I think it's easier living in D3 as football than NAI in some aspects. But if you're baseball or wrestling, that is actually a little tougher because NAI baseball and NAI wrestling thrives a little bit more at those levels. So it was tough for those coaches for sure. And I don't disparage any of their decisions or how they handled it. Everybody's got to handle it a little bit differently. We took the approach that this was a positive for our program and made sure our players knew it.
Coach, are you guys utilizing the 18 iPads that you're allotted, or I shouldn't say that. Let me rephrase how you're allowed to have up to 18 iPads on the sideline. Are you guys utilizing the system of utilizing the iPads, and how did that work in its first year?
Yeah, it was very back and forth, very up and down. First of all, we did go with 10 iPads. That was a little overkill, and the reason we did is we have 10 coaches.
Right.
So I want them to be able to have an iPad that they can utilize in the office as well, and then we will utilize it on the sideline. But really, when it came down to it operationally on the sideline, we probably only actively used about 3 to 4. Actually on the sideline. So we had a good number that were just sitting. And of course, then you got to have a couple up in the press box for your guys that are in the press box, whether they're coordinators or not, because that's the easiest way to view it is for those guys to go back because they're in a static environment. It is actually kind of chaotic, honestly, particularly as a head coach and a head coach who calls plays. It's very chaotic to stay engaged with the game, but then be able to get into the iPad and be able to review that film. Now, we learned some lessons, and how we'll operate it a little bit better. But this year in our conference, not everybody had access to hardware because of some late decisions that were made. And so we made a decision as a conference to if one school didn't have hardware, then the other school wasn't going to utilize. So we only use the iPad 3 times out of our 10
Okay.
throughout the season. So it'll still be kind of fresh for us. And we definitely will have to practice with it. We didn't pull them out this spring just because it's harder in the spring to have people to film
Right.
and all that, and all the setup. And we were short staffed already, so I didn't want to put more pressure on our staff. But once we're back up to full speed, we've got an allotment of some filmers. We definitely need to use it 2 to 3 times minimum during the season in some scrimmage-like situations or even in practice, and just practice using it on the sideline. But I've learned some lessons already on how can we get that iPad in the coach's hand faster, and how can we find that sweet spot of pulling, for instance, quarterbacks together and say, hey, here's 3 things we saw in this last series, and not, for me at least, to not lose sight of what's going on at the game at the same time, because there's no TV timeouts really at Division III. If there's TV timeouts, you got a lot of time that I can sit with the players and look at that iPad. But man, if our defense gets a 3 and out, that's fantastic. But I was in the middle watching some plays, and
Right.
now I don't get to. So I'm kind of with a lot of the coaches that you've had on previously, that at the end of the day, I kind of wish there's definitely pros and cons to it. I kind of wish we just stayed without the technology and we're all on the same page with that. But the genie's out of the bottle and it ain't coming back.
Right.
So we better adapt. And eventually it'll also be the earpieces and the quarterbacks. And, I thought it might be this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it turns around and we have it next year.
Now, before we jump into that, because I think that was the next logical one that was going to come down. There's another one that I've been asking specifically this season with the coaches I've talked to. With the iPads, do we think that this inevitably leads to replay in Division III? And I mean that in the sense of, and I'll give you an example. You got a senior who gets a targeting call made in the second quarter of the homecoming game or the second to last game of the year. We'll do that way. Now, by rule, he's out for the second half. He's out for the first half of the next game. Do you think that we would see replay get utilized easier for the referees to, at halftime, take a look at that and go, oh, maybe we got that one wrong. Now, I don't necessarily think we need to start giving everybody red flags and let them, because, I know we only give 2 in this sport, but still, sometimes they're a little ridiculous. But is that something that you could see? And do you think that the headphone is coming down as early as next season?
I think I'll answer the second one first. I definitely do. Typically, they're going to make those changes every 2 years, and we're in between this year,
Right.
Even though they always say we're not going to make rule changes except every 2 years, but it seems like every year there's some sort of rule change. But I do see, if I was to put odds on it, probably 60-40. I could see potentially coaches are like, okay, we went with the iPads, we added this technology, but it is a lot of stress. It is we've had to reorganize our staff situation a little bit just to dedicate more people to that. We started taking an advanced van ahead of time, where normally we'd just take 2 charter buses and everybody just ride together. Well, now I have to put coaches and some managers on a van. They have to go to the complex. If we're on the road, if we're having to take our own system on the road, a good hour and a half earlier than what our rest of our team would show up, still 2 hours ahead of that, ahead of kickoff, just so they can set everything up and give ourselves time if something craps out. So it's created a little bit of a monster there. The more technology you add, the more layers of things that can go wrong or things that you have to do. But the earpiece is going to be pretty simple.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a financial burden. I mean, we're probably looking at a decent near $1,000 increase to have a couple of those, because you can't just have one.
Right.
You're going to have your backup have one. And probably, I mean, I don't know. I can't even remember. I think at Division I, think they let, like in NFL, let a linebacker or somebody on defense that's calling signals. I think they can do that. Maybe don't hold me to that. I don't pay that close of attention, but there's a price to pay, literally financially, but also just stress and time management on your staff that when you add these layers to it, can become problematic. And we got a pretty healthy staff, and we've got nine paid coaches. One usually a seasonal guy that gets a small stipend. So we've got 10 coaches, but that's still a lot to add on to a plate. On the targeting, we really already have that halftime review, but only at halftime. But I could see us potentially eventually go into some sort of system of a red flag, a challenge. In the Great American Conference, they have that at the Division II level, and they literally have a tent with an administrator or a game administrator or something with a table, and he has an iPad, and they're using the same system that we would use. And they can call a timeout. Officials go over, they look at the iPad under the tent, they come out and make a ruling.
Okay.
Am I for that? Not really, because now you better have some good filming.
Right.
And there can't be that excuse of, well, I've got a work study kid and he didn't show up, so we had to scramble this player, pulled him out of the stand. Like, that's not going to fly when you're talking about the difference in a game. So there's more layers when you add these type of things that can make it problematic we already have issues with, we didn't get very good film because the camera crapped out, and we only had one backup battery, or the disc was full, and our kid missed three plays because he had to replace it. Like, that's just not going to be acceptable when you start adding more and more of these layers, and you're talking about instant replay. And now here was a play that we look back on film, and this could have been a difference maker, and we didn't get a good shot of it, or someone wasn't paying attention and didn't even film at that play. So, because that happens almost every game.
Right. And I have heard that issue from other coaches. I've heard it from people that deal with the changing of films and whatnot. So every school is a different beast, because you may not be set up for great angles. You may not have cables run. There's a lot of things that go into that.
Absolutely.
So, Coach, I have two more questions, and then we're going to get into the Fast Five. My first question is, what does it mean to you to be the longest tenured coach at Lyon?
Well, I'm the longest tenured at 2 colleges now, because MacMurray's close, so no one's beaten that
That's
record.
Right.
And I'm the winningest coach as well at MacMurray. No one's beating that, not for a good reason. But that was a lot of the contribution of our success at MacMurray, was just sheer stubbornness and continuity. MacMurray needed continuity. I was extraordinarily fortunate to have Kyle Langhoff be my defensive coordinator for 7 of the 9 years I was there. And he just got the head coaching job at Beloit.
Right.
And so his ability to commit to us and stay that long really was as much as anything that gave us success at MacMurray. And so I knew, and our administration knew, to have a 4th coach in only 5 years of existence of football at Lyon was, you can't have success doing that. And so I knew that going into it, and no one had to even verbalize that to me. No one even asked, like, where do you see yourself staying 2 years, 5 years? That question, I don't remember that question ever coming up. I knew that was important. And so I knew if I was going to get into this, unless I just felt like this was a bad situation for my family or a bad situation for football, that I need to stay a while to give them some continuity. And, again, we're getting traction, and we're getting the stadium, and so things are happening, and our school is growing. Like, Arkansas has never had a dental program in the state ever, has never had a veterinary school ever. We will seat 80 students, our max capacity of our first class of dental students this summer.
Wow.
In North Little Rock, the Lyon Health Sciences Dental School. And next summer, we will open a veterinary school and plan on seating another 80 students for that. And so we're just, as a school, as an institution, we're growing, we're booming. Right. And then to add the stadium and add that flavor to it, when you're going to get those brats and that smoke, and you're going to get the cheerleaders and the band, and we're going to have the Scott walk and cornhole going, and people out there tailgating. Like, it's going to really start to feel like college.
Right.
It's going to start to feel like a college environment, which Saturdays around here have been kind of dead, honestly, because we haven't had those type of things on campus in the fall. And so, I learned a while back that football is the front porch, and is probably the front step of the front porch to your institution. Athletics is the front porch because it's the most visible. And football is one of the most important things because it is the most visible. It's the biggest driver of enrollment, and it's one of the first out of the gate. We found at MacMurray that the first few years, the spirit and the atmosphere on the campus was just kind of dead, and football had a lot to do with that because we weren't very successful. But when we started having success, there was a lot more energy. And it really brings a lot of life and vibrancy to a campus. When you can have that event on campus and you can have some success, it really brings a lot of spirit and energy to the campus. And when you got a lot of 18-year-olds, you already got a lot of spirit and energy. You just don't want to see it go home on the weekend and be that suitcase college. You want to be that college where people want to stay on Saturdays when you're having home games.
Absolutely. Coach, what's the significance of Division III football?
It really is. And it's funny you say this because I was out, we were talking about this before we started recording. This was my first day out on the road recruiting. And so I got to tell a couple of players, as I say often, like, you have to be a special breed to play Division III football, because you're going to get the same financial aid package as this person who's maybe working a part-time job, or they're just a full-time student. They don't have any other things that they do. Maybe they're part of fraternity, or maybe they're in publications and newspaper or something. Maybe they're not doing anything.
Right.
But they're going to get the same financial aid package. So again, in this world of rev share and NIL mentality, like Division III, I don't want to use the word purity, because guys definitely come to school sometimes as freshmen. I poll half of them or more, and they'll say, "Why'd you come to Lyon?" To play football, and they figure out how to be a student hopefully along the way. And then the other half, they get it. They know that after 4 years, hopefully, of playing football, that I got to make myself a career and go do something. And so there is that. It's more passionate for the sport than it is what you can draw from it in a material sense. It's what we get out of it as far as the enjoyment and the passion, and to be able to scratch that itch that you developed as a Pop Warner kid, or playing in high school. But you also develop so many skills of leadership and teamwork and accountability, and having a goal and developing a plan and working toward that and being able to accomplish something that I think translates so strongly to the work world. And so that's why I'm really so passionate about combining that academic side with that athletic side, and in the middle, driving the importance of career development. And so we have our career services director, Patrick Lynch, come every off season. He's the first guy to come talk to our team, and we call them Worldly Wednesdays. But they come in, and that's stolen, by the way. I did not create that. I think that's an Urban Meyer deal. But come in and talk to the team about being a professional, developing a resume, getting on the social media networks that can enhance their career. Heck, this year he brought in the founder, CEO, and president of First Community Bank, which is the headquarters is right here in town, is a regional bank of about 32 banks around this area. And we had the head honcho come in and give his email to 70 of our players. Like, our guys, I know they don't get that. I know they don't understand how big a deal that is. But for a guy that's accomplished that and is that age, to come in and talk to these 18 to 22-year-olds and share his email to them, wow, huge, huge. Like, I told our guys, if you don't take advantage of that, woe be unto you.
Right. I mean, that's huge to have that type of opportunity. All right, Coach.
Absolutely.
It's the Fast Five. These have nothing to do with football. They're just about you. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Around family would be really nice. But if I'm just taking the family aspect out of it, I love the mountains. I've got a lot of friends and people that talk, oh, I'd love to live on the beach, live in Florida, live on the coast, Mobile. I want to be in the mountains. Like I love the snow cap. I don't mind it being cold. Now, I was in North Dakota for a year and a half, so there's some bad cold, and then
Yeah.
there's kind of some fun cold as well. I would kind of like to live there. Now, I will say if we're talking about family, we're actually going to go out this summer and see my father-in-law. He lives out in Southern Oregon, like that Ashland area, kind of on the Siskiyou Mountain
Mhm.
range. That is beautiful area. Like if I could pick another place, it'd be there or like on the Oregon coast, like right on the coast. And everybody
Right.
says, oh, it's always dreary and it's raining. I think that's awesome. Like I love that ocean and that black sand and so it would be either probably the Rockies or maybe the Oregon coast.
Okay. What is the most important lesson that you've learned thus far over your career?
It takes everybody. Like I really learned at Southwestern when, got let go. The people you surround yourself makes the difference. And so it puts me under honestly a lot of stress when I lose a coach. We talked about it earlier, developing coaches and moving them on. Well, we lost two really good coaches this offseason, a full-time wide receiver and a full-time defensive back coach, because they had opportunities to advance their career. One of them went on to Wisconsin Whitewater. He's going to jump in from here to a school that's probably going to be in the top 10, top five day one. And then another that went from being a defensive back coach to being a defense coordinator. I mean, talk about advancement. Like I was upset because we're losing them and they've
Right.
done great work here. And I felt like they help us grow our program. But man, what I mean, give them a hug and we call them butt slaps and high fives, and say, man, go tear it up because that's a great opportunity. But then on the flip side of that, then I stress out and I'm like, I got to hire the right guy
Right.
because I know now how critical it is when you don't hire the right guy. It makes your life so much harder and it puts your team behind in developing because it really is. I heard Urban, and I'll bring up Urban Meyer again. Heard him years ago at AFCA convention talking about being nine strong. Like your every position group is critical, and it's got to be led by someone who's competent, confident, and committed. And so we gotta hire smart guys that care about coaching kids, that care about them like they're their own sons, and also understand that it is small college football and like you got to go recruit guys. And
Right.
sometimes they're not always the best player, but we still got to recruit those guys and then we got to keep them and develop them. And so it's that continual process. I actually was on a phone call with a coach that we're potentially interviewing. And I said, yeah, you're going to wear a lot of hats. We don't have to wear at Lyon. We don't have to wear hats like I'm also the track coach or I'm working in the dorms or things like that. But our hats are, I have to develop our guys academically. There's not an academic area that our players go to in the athletic department to say, hey, you work with these people on tutoring
Mhm.
and everything. We have
Right.
those. I mean, they're for every student, but we end up being ultimately responsible for the academics. Um, I don't have a recruiting staff. Our staff does it. I don't have an equipment staff. Our staff does it. Everybody's a strength coach.
Right.
So you got to hire guys that are capable and willing to learn and do that and fit and also just be culturally a fit for me, for our staff, for our program, for our school. And so it kind of puts me a little bit under stress because I know how important it is to find that right guy.
If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing?
Wow. I don't know, 32 years of coaching, I've never done anything else. Now before that, mowed lawns and laid irrigation pipe and painted dorms and I mean, you name it. I don't know. I think probably something maybe in education, but some days I think doing this long, what is that business sector like? What is that like? So I've wondered that myself, honestly. If one of these days, as I say, sometimes you get run out of the business because you get to a certain age and it's really hard to find work. It's hard to find a job that will pay enough to if you're still trying to support a family. So what would that next life look like? I don't know. I really don't.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
I love you. A player saying I love you because that means that I did ultimately what my mission is to do, what my purpose is to do. Here at Lyon, we call it, and we did it at MacMurray too, we call it 4 for 40.
Mhm.
For 4 years, we try to pour everything we can into them to give them value to be the best they can be for the next 40 years of their life. Best husband, best father, best brother, best employee, employer, citizen of the year, whatever. Try to pour into them as much as we can. And sometimes it takes a year or two, 5 years for guys to realize that sometimes that hard talk and that hard conversation and that hard coaching was to get them ready for those next 40 years. When they come back and they say, I love you because of what you did, that is kind of the ultimate compliment.
On the other side of compliments, what's the best insult you've ever gotten?
Wow. Your team plays hard.
On the
because it's probably a backhanded compliment because we lost the game.
I hear you. I was going to say, was there a little bit of facetiousness behind the? All right.
Well, I think when most people say that, it's one of two things. One, I mean, I do think for the most part our guys play hard, but like I tell them, that's kind of the prerequisite.
Yeah,
Like,
you gotta.
I tell our coaches, we're not going to coach your effort. Like, you're a college athlete. Like, if you didn't bring effort to this endeavor, we got a bigger problem. Like, we recruited the wrong guy.
Right.
So now that's not to say that we don't address effort or lack thereof at times, but normally when someone says, "Hey, your team plays hard," it's probably because you were on the short end of the stick and they're at the end of the game, and you got an L instead of a W, and they're trying to find a way to make you feel better or to point something of the positive. And I appreciate that. I'm not taking it in a bad way, but it usually is where, hey, I'm trying to help find something to make me feel better when I talk to you about this loss you just had and maybe make you feel better. But yeah.
Interesting. All right, Coach, last question. Was there a question that you were expecting me to ask you? And if so, how would you have answered it?
Ooh, we covered a lot of ground. We talked about in the about Lyon versus Lions versus Lyon. Why the Scots? That might be a good question to ask. Why are we called the Scots? Yeah, that's about all I can find right now. Yeah.
Why are you called the Scots?
This was originally founded by Presbyterian ministers from Scotland.
Oh, okay.
152 years ago. So the Presbyterian Church downtown was actually the center of the college, and then got moved where our location is now. We're kind of up on a bluff that kind of looks over the north side of town. Was actually an orphanage for a good while. And when that closed down, there was some land and some buildings. And so in the 50s, I think like 58, the school bought the land and the buildings, and then in 62 they moved everything up. And so we're called the Scots for that. The funny thing is my last name is Douglas, which is a Scottish name. The last place I was at was MacMurray. Scottish heritage. We were the Highlanders. There's a lot of schools. Alma College is the Scots, Monmouth. I think there's a couple on the East Coast I can't think of now off the top of my head, but the Scots are actually pretty popular, but there aren't a lot of Highlanders, that's for sure. So it's really been really interesting and weird that a guy who, I haven't done like the, 23andMe but my dad has. But obviously the last name is Scottish heritage. So, I don't know, it's kind of interesting and kind of quirky how it's kind of circled that way. And now 2 colleges in a row be at Scottish heritage schools. But I will say this, at MacMurray, we did not have one of the biggest Scottish festivals in the nation. We have people all over the world come. It's not as much a homecoming now as it is a Scots Fest. Homecoming kind of gets swallowed up a little bit. Now this year will probably be different having the home stadium, but we have a big Scottish festival on campus. The bagpipes, the Scottish games, the foods, crafts, and stuff on campus every year. We literally have people hired on campus to fundraise and organize that annually because it is the biggest thing that happens on our campus every year. And then we actually have a bagpipe team, and you can take classes in Scottish Heritage and kind of come away with, I don't know if it's a minor, but an emphasis in Scottish Heritage or Scottish, Scottish something here. So it's kind of unique. It's kind of fun. And, I know a couple of those guys, develop relationships with some of those guys that have worked in institutional advancement and also do the Scottish Heritage here on campus. Is pretty fun.
Well, Coach,
I'm not wearing a kilt for a game.
You're not going to go Coach Couch and bring out the kilt?
My legs are a little too skinny. I just don't think I would do it justice. I think I would look like a middle school girl in a kilt.
Well, Coach, I want to say that I'm glad that we could get this from email talking to having you in person. Thank you for taking
Absolutely.
the time to sit down with us. For those of you that are sticking around, we'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Dingo Talk. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. For more info and to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter @DingoTalk.